Welcome to Electrified. It's your host, Dylan Loomis. Just a correction from Friday's episode. When talking about Tesla's Supercharger for Business program, I misspoke and said that the superchargers were owned by Tesla, when in reality, and obviously they are indeed owned by the business, they're just managed by Tesla. So my apologies for the confusion. And another correction, I shared that video of Kyle Connor from Out of Spec talking about QHD for Tesla's new screen and the Model Y performance. As it turns out though, contrary to what Kyle said, QHD has roughly 3.6 million pixels, which is less than a 4K resolution, which offers around 8 million pixels. So Tesla has never had a 4K screen in its vehicles, and QHD has less pixels than 4K. I'm sure most of you have already seen the post from Elon by now saying that Tesla does indeed have advanced AI chip engineering teams. He said Tesla's close to taping out AI 5, which is usually the final step in the design phase of an AI chip. Tesla is starting to work on AI 6, and the goal is to bring a new AI chip design to volume production every 12 months. We expect to build chips at higher volumes ultimately than all other AI chips combined. Of course, this is a moonshot type statement, but in fairness, we don't know what Elon means when he says AI chips, as that is quite vague and could be defined many different ways. Elon said how these chips will save millions of lives due to safer driving and providing advanced medical care to all people via Optimus. Important to note, this was mainly a post for recruiting AI chip talent. Elon said again he's deeply involved in the chip design and meets with the engineering team every Tuesday and Saturday. The Saturday meetings are short-term and will no longer be needed in a few months when AI 5 is taped out. We've already known that Tesla plans to move as fast as possible when it comes to AI chip production, both in partnership with companies like TSMC and Samsung, and potentially on its own vertically integrated with something like a terafab. But there's one storyline here that I don't really see many people talking about, and it is the bottleneck for this entire industry. Lithography is the process of transferring chip designs onto silicon wafers using light, which defines the smallest transistor sizes. There's two main methods to do this: DUV, deep ultraviolet, and EUV, extreme ultraviolet. But the thing is, you need EUV to enable features smaller than 7 nanometers. And remember, under about 15 nanometers, it's no longer referring to literal sizes on the chip. In most cases, it's just talking about the latest technology. But here's the problem. ASML, a Dutch company, is the only supplier of EUV lithography machines. Further, each EUV system is a marvel of engineering containing more than 100,000 components. These machines weigh around 180 tons and cost upwards of $250 million each. ASML's ability to manufacture these EUV machines falls far short of global demand. In 2024, ASML shipped 60 EUV systems. The industry demand exceeds 150 units per year, and ASML only has plans to increase capacity to about 90 units this year. And there's more. The EUV supply chain involves over 5,000 suppliers worldwide. Some parts, like high-precision mirrors, have a single source, making the chain highly vulnerable. Any disruption, geopolitical tensions, natural disasters, or logistics issues can delay EUV machine delivery and halt advanced chip manufacturing. And what does Elon always say? Things can only go as fast as the least lucky part of the process. And when it comes to EUV machines, that supply chain is massive, which means a lot can go wrong. And ultimately, no matter how fast Elon and Tesla want to go, as it stands right now, there are industry bottlenecks to create chips at the pace Tesla wants. It shouldn't be much of a problem in the near term, as robotaxis and Optimus are not scaling yet, but as we approach 2030 and beyond, Tesla is going to need to figure something out, which is part of why Elon's getting serious about this now. But based on the conversation over the weekend, I just want Tesla fans and investors to understand the scaling challenges that are going to become very real for Tesla in the next 5 years plus. Ashok added, not to mention these chips are heavily co-designed with the Tesla AI software teams to achieve incredible performance while also beating by a large margin on performance per watt and performance per dollar. AI4 can process and understand a million pixels of streaming video within around 1 millisecond. This is only achievable because the software and the hardware are designed together to achieve this performance point. As we've been saying, for a competitor to try to replicate what Tesla's doing with FSD and going the camera-only route, it sounds like they would have to design their own silicon and have those plans run through their AI software divisions. But as we know so far, most of the competition is not even trying to solve autonomy, and those that are using LiDAR and going the sensor-heavy route. So to think that Tesla does not have a moat when it comes to FSD on the hardware or software side is ridiculous in my opinion. And Elon said exactly to what Ashok said. Julian from Tesla said the latency of our autopilot computer, which is used by both Optimus and FSD, is from photon hitting the sensor to it being processed by the neural net chip extremely low. Everything is optimized, everything is hardware accelerated as much as possible, no software stack overhead, minimal image processing overhead. This is why the FSD stack is so reactive. This matters a lot for Optimus when we close the loop with vision. Perhaps the bigger takeaway as an owner of Tesla vehicles will be what the implications are if Tesla achieves its goal of a new chip in volume production every 12 months. Will the chips be upgradable, or every 12 months will the hardware in your car be outdated? This conversation won't come into play until 2028 and beyond, because we're not going to see AI5 until mid-2027 at the earliest, and Tesla probably doesn't even know how it's going to handle retrofits or upgrades right now. But at least for early adopters and people like us who are very far into the weeds, it'll be something to pay attention to. Just remember, for 99% of people, it's not going to matter at all, as the average Tesla owner knows very little about the silicon in the cars. I mean, remember, a significant amount of the Tesla ownership group doesn't even know about FSD, so we just have to keep all of that in perspective. But the takeaway is simple. Chips are the unlock for Tesla to scale. Elon and Tesla are all in on silicon design and working with fabs and possibly becoming a fab to manufacture as many as possible. But there are bottlenecks in the industry right now that not even Tesla has answers for, at least not that we know publicly. So we will see if Elon and Tesla can continue to pull rabbits out of a hat. Some of you will remember a few years ago when some Tesla employees shared thousands of pretty invasive customer videos on an internal chat platform that led to a US class action lawsuit. It never went to trial, as Tesla was able to move to arbitration and things were likely settled behind closed doors, but it's a great reminder that with our phones, computers, devices, and now cars, our privacy is largely gone if we don't do anything, which is why I'm such a vocal supporter of Delete Me, the sponsor of this video. I do want to say, without you guys being so generous and trying out sponsors of the channel, I really would not be able to do Electrified like I do today, so I appreciate you all more than you know. But Delete Me is an American-based company, and this is all they do. They specialize in removing personal data from data brokers online, the nefarious actors selling your data. With AI scams on the rise and seemingly more Looney Tunes in the world than ever, I think it's crucial to remove as much of your personal info from the web as you can. And Delete Me does this continually, sending you detailed quarterly reports, because each time you buy something online or create an account or share an email, you run the risk of a data broker grabbing your information. So if you want some peace of mind and your privacy back and to support Electrified, you can head to joindeleteme.com/electrified to get 20% off using my code Electrified linked below, or by using the QR code on the screen. On Friday, it was unofficial, but fast forward to today and it's now official. Tesla is distributing FSD supervised 14.1.4 to actual owners in South Korea, starting with Model S and X AI4 vehicles. So we now have the United States, Canada, Mexico, Puerto Rico, Australia, New Zealand, China, I would say with an asterisk on a very small scale, and now South Korea. As far as I've seen so far, most of the customers in Australia are still on version 13, so not all of those countries are on version 14. But it is now official, customer cars in South Korea have FSD version 14. No word yet on when the rollout will include Model 3 and Y vehicles, but I would guess it'll be right around the corner. Speaking of approvals and supervised FSD deployment, a lot happened over the weekend when it comes to Tesla and the regulatory environment across Europe. Tesla said it's been working hard to try to deliver supervised FSD for over a year. They've been giving FSD demos to regulators of almost every country. They've requested early access, pilot release programs, or exemptions where possible. They've shared the safety data and called out they've driven over 1 million kilometers safely on EU roads across 17 different countries, that for internal testing. That works out to roughly 620,000 miles. Tesla said our main path to success is partnering with the Dutch Approval Authority, RDW, to gain exemption for the feature. Tesla has to prove it complies with existing regulations, and they will have to file an exemption, EU Article 39, we've talked about numerous times in the past. This for yet to be regulated behaviors like level 2 systems, off-highway, system-initiated lane changes with hands off the wheel, etc. Some of these regulations are outdated and rules-based, which makes FSD illegal in its current form. Changing FSD to be compliant with these rules would make it unsafe and unusable. While we have changed FSD to be maximally compliant where it's logical and reasonable, we will not sacrifice the safety of a proven system or materially deteriorate customer usability. As a result, we're gathering evidence to get exemptions on a specific rule-by-rule basis. Unfortunately, the real-world fleet-proven safety wins alone are considered insufficient. Tesla said right now the RDW has committed to granting Netherlands national approval in February 2026. And then Tesla shared a link for everyone to contact the RDW to thank them in advance and share their excitement. Upon Netherlands national approval, other EU countries can immediately recognize the exemption and also allow rollout within their country. Then we will bring it to a TCMV vote for official EU-wide approval. And then, of course, everyone started celebrating, thinking that supervised FSD would roll out in at least some European countries as soon as February 2026. But today, the RDW put out an official response. They said, "We do not share details about pending applications from manufacturers because this is market and competition-sensitive information. We can, however, mention the RDW has drawn up a schedule with Tesla in which Tesla is expected to be able to demonstrate that FSD supervised meets the requirements in February 2026. RDW and Tesla know what efforts need to be made to make a decision on this in February. Whether the schedule will be met remains to be seen in the coming period. For the RDW, safety is paramount, which I think is quite ironic. So clearly, the RDW is not aligned with what Tesla is saying. Tesla said the RDW's already committed to granting Netherlands national approval in February 2026. But the RDW is saying, no, Tesla's only going to have an opportunity to demonstrate that they can meet the requirements in February 2026. And then, depending on how things go, we will make a decision in February. And further, the RDW outright said, do not contact us, do not do what Tesla said, because it takes up unnecessary time for our customer service. And further, this will have no influence on whether or not the planning is met. So in a sense, they're saying it doesn't really matter what the people say, we're going to do what we want to do. And of course, they're just using safety as a banner shield when in reality, we've seen the safety data and it's better with FSD. And then the RDW also had some commentary about how the exemption would work, which Tesla said is definitely their best path forward. To obtain this exemption, a member state must submit an application to the European Commission on behalf of the manufacturer. This means the Netherlands will have to submit the application on behalf of Tesla. Then approval requires a majority vote within the responsible EU committee. If a majority votes in favor, the manufacturer gets that exemption for the new tech. The exemption is then valid in all member states, meaning the technology may be used throughout the EU. If there's no majority vote, the exemption remains valid only within the Netherlands, and this technology may only be used there. Other member states can then decide for themselves whether to adopt the approval for their territory. Which again is another contradiction because Tesla said upon national approval in the Netherlands, other EU countries can immediately recognize the exemption, allowing for rollout in their country. Whereas the RDW is saying, no, only if there is then a majority vote in favor will Tesla get an exemption for FSD across the EU. Which means if during that vote there's no majority, then after that each other country would have to decide country by country what they want to do. And finally, before the Netherlands could even submit for that exemption on behalf of Tesla, Tesla would first have to demonstrate a vehicle or system complies with regulations by undergoing a comprehensive test procedure with a type approval authority, which in the Netherlands we know is the RDW. So unless something is getting lost in translation here, one of these sides is lying about what they have actually agreed to. And listen, I actually went back to try to pull that post for Tesla's AI roadmap they shared toward the end of 2024. It said toward the end that Tesla was expecting FSD supervised to roll out in Europe and China in Q1 of 2025. And it said pending regulatory approval. As we know, we're now just over 1 month away from being in Q1 2026. So my point here is Tesla has been expecting and thinking FSD would get approved across the EU for over a year, and it hasn't happened. So I tend to think that Tesla's just trying to apply pressure and make its best guess on when approval will happen, but Tesla's been wrong, and quite wrong, and at the end of the day, it's pretty clear the RDW is pumping the brakes here. And listen, we all know the EU auto industry is in trouble with BYD and Chinese companies undercutting its homegrown brands in the EV space, and when FSD gets approved across the EU, millions of people will wake up to how far ahead Tesla is, because remember, most people over there still think autopilot is basically the same as FSD, which everyone in the know knows is an utter joke. So the regulatory bodies in the EU can shout about safety all they want, but it's a facade because the data and the real world testing is clear, and it's just they do not want to acknowledge it. And then Keys chimed in saying, do you want to know why I've become so pessimistic in my timelines? It's because of exchanges like these between Tesla employees and, in this instance, the Norwegian road transport authorities. No matter how much data Tesla provides and how many times they explain their MO, they just keep getting the same responses. In short, Tesla was just trying to get approval to test FSD version 14 in Norway, whereas to date they've only been allowed to test version 13 on a handful of cars. And yes, of course, it's fine for the regulators to ask questions, but it becomes clear quickly the EU authorities are doing all they can to slow things down and make things as difficult as possible for Tesla to even just test FSD on a super small scale in one country. So it still feels like the time when they're going to be ready to have widespread approval across the EU is still relatively far away. Now, of course, a lot could change in a short amount of time. But based on the wording and all of the attitudes right now, I would not be holding my breath for February 2026 to expect supervised FSD even in the Netherlands, despite what Tesla said on X. And just so you know, if it does make it to that vote, which would need a majority, it would be the Technical Committee on Motor Vehicles. That's the TCMV that would be voting. It's made up of one delegate per EU member state, and it's usually a senior official from a national type approval authority or relevant ministry. Think a role like transport and infrastructure. And I think we at least have to acknowledge beyond the EU auto industry being in trouble if FSD were to be approved, we also have large groups of the EU population and leadership that is anti-Elon thanks to his politics. And maybe I'm jaded when it comes to believing politicians can do the right thing for their constituents and put their own bias aside, because it seems to be so incredibly rare from where I'm sitting. So I really hope you don't view this segment as me being a pessimist. I'm really just trying to approach all of this from a realist perspective. And I'm simply acknowledging that what Tesla is saying and what the RDW UAW is saying are very different, and I do think there is good reason to believe that the regulators across the EU are indirectly incentivized to delay the release of supervised FSD as long as possible. So of course I would love to be wrong, but for now we have to sit back and wait and see what happens in February. We have analyst Rob Wertheimer from Melius Research saying that Tesla stock is a must-own. This because the world is about to change dramatically. He used a Hemingway line saying 2 ways gradually and then suddenly, talking about how that dynamic applies to autonomy, and he said, "Our point is not that Tesla's at risk, it's that everybody else is." He said, "In the next 5 years, we will see hundreds of billions in value shift to Tesla. Public awareness right now is still very low. Not even 1 out of 100 Americans have ridden in a self-driving car. When that changes, it will shock most people." And he argued that Tesla's lead is widening, not shrinking. Strategic choices on chips, vertical integration, software, and the decision to think of the vehicle differently are said to have left legacy automakers struggling with outdated architectures and fragmented supplier systems. So he gets it, like many of us have gotten it now for quite some time. Lewis responded to this news saying, "I take no joy in this, but they, Legacy Auto, have had plenty of warning time," sharing an image of a graveyard with the legacy automakers. And at the entrance, no autonomy. But I'm sharing because Elon replied to that saying, "I've tried to warn them and even offered to license Tesla FSD, but they don't want it. It's crazy." When Legacy Auto does occasionally reach out, they tepidly discuss implementing FSD for a tiny program in 5 years with unworkable requirements for Tesla. It's so pointless. If you've been following along, you would acknowledge that I have admittedly been somewhat bearish on Tesla licensing FSD to anyone in Legacy Auto. I've thought it was somewhat obvious because most of Legacy Auto has come out and said that they want LiDAR and they believe in using it, or they're going to pair up with NVIDIA and take that approach. And as I've always said, these companies are not going to want to give Tesla any money or any acknowledgement that their FSD is the way forward. For the most part, they already waved the white flag in the charging department, pushing their customers to Tesla superchargers. And as I said a few weeks ago, these companies are going to have to fail again because they'll do anything in their power to not bow the proverbial knee to Tesla. So they're going to try these off-the-shelf tools from NVIDIA, and when they don't get them to autonomy by 2030, then at that point, maybe these companies come around and say, well, if we're going to survive, we actually need Tesla. But you no longer have to take it just from me. Elon is basically saying that Tesla licensing FSD doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime in the next few years. And if and when that narrative changes, it's going to take a few years from that point before any legacy OEM would actually have FSD integrated into its own cars. So on one hand, yes, it's disappointing not just for the safety of the roads, but for Tesla's business opportunity not coming to fruition. But on the other hand, now once that shock sets in and people start waking up by the millions to what Tesla has, they'll be forced to go to Tesla, as no legacy auto company will be able to offer anything close. Not now and not anytime soon. Ethan has put together an unofficial vehicle fleet tracker for Tesla's robotaxi program in Austin. Right now, he's saying they have 29 active vehicles in the fleet. This is community sourced, so you can submit a vehicle if you see a different plate out in the wild than what's already listed. The site is teslarobotaxitracker.com. Over the weekend, there were more instances of people waiting over 40 minutes for a ride, sharing screenshots, some saying their ride was 44 minutes away. I'm expecting the fleet number to increase very quickly once the safety monitors are removed, and hopefully that happens in the next 30 days or so, but until then, it's fair to wonder why Tesla has opened the service now instead of waiting until the fleet is scaled. But who knows, maybe Tesla wants to see what the demand is with the service open for a few weeks, and once the safety monitors are removed, then Tesla can scale appropriately based on that data. On FSD 14.2, I have not had a chance to try it, but as I record, it's downloading on my wife's Model Y, but still nothing on my Model 3. Holmar said many people are reporting strange routing and navigation issues across different versions of FSD, including 14.2. And Brian from Futuraza said, had this tonight on our first 14.2 drive. Instead of turning right, it turned left, right, and then left. It also turned into the wrong parking lot. But I'm sharing because it brings up a key point. What is Tesla doing with the map data? The last video I posted about FSD 14 in my first week with it, you might remember outside of the braking and hesitation, the biggest issue seemed like it had to do with map data. And Chuck Cook said bad map data continues to feel like the Achilles heel that needs a better solution. I seem to feel like a crowdsourced solution is the fix. He said we need to find a way for owners and users to report these issues. And if you've ever used Waze, I'm sure you've thought about this a few times. Why wouldn't Tesla do something like this itself? And where is Tesla at when it comes to the ability to actually read signs instead of just recognizing signs? There's obviously a huge gap there, and we don't really know where Tesla's AI currently falls on that spectrum. And not just for navigation, but for speed limit changes and school zones. All the areas where even version 14 isn't quite where it needs to be. I was going to run through a few clips of 14.2 to kind of show where it's at, but now that I'm getting the software downloaded on one of our cars now, I'll have the chance to test it tonight and tomorrow, so in the next episode I'll be able to share my first-hand experience. But for today, Darren put out a warning about 14.2. He said it's amazing at driving, but it's still pretty bad at parking. His first attempt parking in a parking lot resulted in FSD backing into a cart return stall, which is not the first time we've seen this. I've had problems with older versions with parking in reverse. I've seen a few people talking about Cybertruck having issues finding parking spots with 14.2, and I've seen a handful of anecdotes of people saying that the parking lot behavior on 14.2 has regressed slightly. So if you have 14.2, just be extra aware in parking lots. Green the Only said software update 2025.44 brings in a curiously named geofence region, Bay Unsupervised California DMV. Green said it's likely for some ongoing internal testing. He was asked, is this really the first sign of unsupervised making it out to regular people? To which Green said, I think so, at least I don't remember any earlier references. As always, we need to be careful with anything we see in the code, but hopefully Tesla removes the safety monitors in Austin in December, and then does the same thing in the Bay Area maybe as soon as Q1 next year. Nick shared a post where Lars was talking about how Tesla was able to remove 400 pounds out of the new Model X over the years. Lars responded saying, mass is serious. I really do care that much. Mass is everything. Safety, efficiency, attributes like NVH, energy, consumption, cost, everything. If you don't care about mass, you don't care about your customer. A colleague of mine recently quoted another colleague in a meeting, mass begets mass. I smiled inside a bit because I knew we had a culture that fights mass with a passion. And Zach, who is working on the Cybercab at Tesla, said every gram that's not removed needs to be accelerated by the drive unit, supported by suspension, reacted by crash structure, and decelerated by brakes, which decrease efficiency and performance of the vehicle. Part of the reason Tesla is special is because we inherited DNA from SpaceX. In rocketry, this mass cycle problem is further compounded by the fact that if you don't manage mass, you will not fly. Hardware 3 owners will love to hear that Tesla's hiring for an AI engineer for reinforcement learning and distillation. The job description at Tesla AI, we want to develop Olympiad-level physical intelligence that will enable highly capable robots, both wheeled and legged. These models should be able to anticipate and reason about future movements of any object or scene at the level of a race car driver or professional athlete. An added level of complexity with robotics is the requirement to run at real time on local compute. This requirement acts as a forcing function for Tesla AI to develop models that optimize for the highest intelligence per byte of parameters. You will get the chance to distill these large models to smaller models that will run on our state-of-the-art inference hardware. AKA, this role will focus on getting cutting-edge models like FSD 14 to run on inference hardware like Hardware 3. As it stands now in Norway, Volkswagen has the annual record for most registrations from one brand. That record has stood since 2016. But now, with 1 month left in 2025, it seems all but certain that Tesla will overtake VW's all-time record in Norway. But as we highlight often, you can't just cherry pick one country or another to say how things are going, because in Sweden right now, Tesla's annual year-to-date registrations are down 68% year over year. And just to further drive home my points about the anti-Tesla sentiment across the EU, the Center Party is suggesting that Stockholm should work for getting pilot tests of Waymo service in the city. This despite the fact that at a recent meeting they said Waymo has not even sent an official application to Stockholm. But in this case, they're already preemptively welcoming Waymo to the region. In the initial letter, they said, "We propose the city initiate work to invite Waymo to conduct trials with autonomous vehicles in Stockholm." But guess what? Just a few months ago, we shared the news that Swedish transport authorities officially banned Tesla from conducting FSD tests in Stockholm. And do you remember the reason they gave? It's because they said the city was too busy with other work. But Waymo hasn't even applied officially yet, but we have Stockholm putting out a letter saying, yes, we would love to welcome Waymo to test autonomous driving in our city. And listen, I get it. Waymo does not have the supervision aspect that Tesla's current system does. But I'm sorry, you just can't convince me that with years of these sympathy strikes and anti-Tesla sentiment in Sweden, that those data points just don't matter at all and there's not more going on here. Tesla will still have the last laugh, and it'll be that much sweeter when it happens. Tesla stock closed the day at $417.78, up 6.82%, while the NDX was up 2.62%. The volume was 13% above the average. Don't forget, check out Delete Me linked below for those interested. It makes for a better gift for your family than you may expect. Hope you have a wonderful day. Please like the video. If you did, you can find me on X linked below. And a huge thank you to all of my Patreon supporters.